Welcome, and thank you for tuning into the Supply Chain Dialogues podcast, where we will dive into the procurement, supply chain, and operations management world with some sprinkling on top concerning organizations management. We got insights for you into new, old, and some even outdated truths, and hopefully that will make you more successful in your job by expanding your knowledge of solutions out there. My name is Daniel Helmig, your host for the show. I ran supply chains, procurements, and operations globally in 5 industries in more years than I care to remember.
And I'm Amy, the AI-generated co-host voice of the show. I will ask questions and provide from time to time facts and figures provided by my other AI siblings.
Thank you, Amy, and let's dive into the show. This episode is called Cats and Typewriters, or Resilience Through Contractual Lego-like Blocks. We start the episode with 2 examples, and both actually happened. Let's start with the cat case. There once was a cat that fell into a barrel of engine oil to be shipped to an automotive OEM. A sizable amount of vehicles were filled with this oil during the assembly process. In the final inspection at the end of the assembly line, the engines caused trouble. In the root cause analysis after many chemical tests, it became clear that a feline must have contaminated the products. So far, so bad. The relationship with the supplier was strained already for some time, and this was the final straw. The OEM, who usually would have looked for an amicable solution with their supplier, sued this one since the supplier was unwilling to pay for the consequential damages caused. And guess what? The supplier won. Now, why? You and many other cat lovers might ask. Well, because the OEM did define a lot of contaminants in the oil specification that the supplier should check for, but nowhere was written to check for, you guessed it, cats. Now, this could have been prevented if this particular OEM organization had used the contractual template of the rest of the corporation with the phrase fit for function. In essence, the phrase emphasizes the importance of ensuring that the product or service is suitable for its intended purpose as defined in the contract. Hence, no cats, dogs, fish, or other contaminants that could lead to engine failure. Now, you might argue that the occurrence of cats or other animal remains is rare in the products you receive, and you're right. But after many, many years of working in supply chain in 5 industries, I could spend days going through real-time fails that were linked to the absence of individual contractual sentences that should be there either on the global terms and conditions or in the supply contract. Now, let's move from the cat example to the typewriter example. There once was a procurement department that was measured on contractual milestones they passed up to signature during a given time. The department took pride in the massive, arcane documents they negotiated. The buyers told war stories about their epic negotiations with suppliers to agree on their terms and conditions, and their metrics to show their workload. There were whole departments led by former lawyers that negotiated aspects of work farmed out to suppliers, leading to 4 different procurement departments, often dealing with the same suppliers. Buyers spent 20 to 30% a week on negotiating contractual terms. There was not much time left for getting lower cost or better services. This was done by the so-called grown-ups in the internal customer departments, people that had pre-selected suppliers in the first place, often without any market testing, just because they knew better. Again, outlandish, you might think, specifically when you're employed in the manufacturing industry, which normally has tough as nails procurement teams. But the alternate reality in many professional service industries is that buyers are, unfortunately, often intelligent typewriters of their internal commercial customers. So what, you might say? Now, the alternative to the above 2 cases is a modern standardized contract portfolio setup. It leads to risk reduction. In the case of a fault of the supplier, your company can rely on applications of standardized agreed terms, so no cat problems. And workload reduction, because there is little to no involvement of lawyers and buyers on the day-to-day commercial documentation front, and they can concentrate on triple bottom line, profit, people, planet, so no typewriters anywhere. Sounds simple, right? Still, many companies have a rather loose definition of standards regarding the buy side of the enterprise, opening themselves up to litigation, risks, and unnecessary waste of resources. Just look around. How many different general terms and conditions exist in your company that were sent to suppliers? How many payment terms are accepted? How many statement of work formats are in circulation? How many different non-disclosure agreements exists? Are the contractual formats aligned? How about simple things like accounting addresses on the forms? Are they correct? How many different confidentiality phrases exist in your templates? Is there a repository of standard documents for procurement to use? And how about templates for internal procurement, which is one business buys from the other? Do you have an online contractual work tool? And if yes, does it make work in procurement or sales manageable, or more workload intense since it was designed for the need of lawyers in the firm, not necessarily operations? So, welcome to the jungle. Many companies work with an unorganized jungle of contractual documents because standardization is more in operations than a legal concept, and that specifically in the Anglo-American case law-trained legal professionals. The issue is that most buyers and salespeople have not studied law. If lucky, they get a one-day course in do's and don'ts, sometimes in their early careers. Hence, if a product and service company has an army of lawyers, in and external, exhausted and frustrated due to all the humdrum, ever-repeating work they have to do for sales and procurement, you have a clear sign of missing standardization, accompanied by people trained in the perception that making hours means making money. And in sales and procurement, good people with competence in selling or buying spend their time in long email and conference room battles about singular words in contracts, instead of fighting for innovation, lead time, ESG, and margins. So, standardization is the way. The solution is quite apparent and alluded to before. Legal documents in a corporate context are to be standardized as much as possible and tailored as little as needed. To get there, we recommend a simple 3-step approach. Number 1. Build legal building blocks, like Lego blocks. Company lawyers align across the company together with their operations, customers, sales, service, procurement, the building blocks of contracts like liability, guarantee, compliance, termination, and so on and so on. The art is to focus on having as few variations as possible while still achieving legal compliance with all markets you sell, manufacture, or buy. The building blocks can be tailored into 3 levels. Level A is the strongest statement protecting the company 100% and would be declared as preferred. The next is then still acceptable, which takes the standard industry agreed version, followed by acceptable after approval, which is the less preferable option and should only apply when there is no short-term alternative to a supplier. Now, on the second step, we have to look at assembling these building blocks. So they are assembled into general terms and conditions and individual contracts. Which contractual building block belongs in which level, general or individual, is part of internal discussions. As a guiding rule, everything the company feels strongly about being accepted across the board belongs into the general terms and condition. Next is which version, then preferred, still acceptable upon approval, should be used as a standard. Here I recommend going with the industry standard approach, unless you look only for the extended workbench of suppliers. Some companies also define special terms and conditions that are too special for a general condition document, but general enough to apply for a full supply market, like for example IT service or chemicals and this kind of stuff. All general and special terms and conditions must be published on the company's webpage, with older versions annually still accessible in archives. Some old-fashioned legislation in some countries also requires a bilateral signature on the agreement. So for global terms and conditions or special terms and conditions, this should be built as a routine in the contract-to-source procurement system. The next step is then all about simplifying. So we simplify the creation and management of contracts. What constitutes a contract in your firm? Which building blocks are mandatory? What is a release? What is a contract? Do we allow letter of intentions, so LOIs? What can be done without an NDA? Who approves what? How do we deal with toxic offers? What constitutes a good statement of work? For the visually inclined listeners, picture a Roman temple structure, which is probably after the pyramid the most overused picture on PowerPoint. And that temple would be made out of these Lego-like building blocks. The roof constitutes the general terms and conditions. Pillars are the different special terms and conditions, and the base is individual contracts gathered under the respective pillars. The crevices are filled with NDAs, LOIs, releases, etc., all assembled from the same Lego molds. So the result is that every contractual relationship is then built as an image of this temple structure, leading to the following. First, contractual security. Second, massive workload reduction, as we mentioned before, in legal and procurement departments. Time that can be used for value-add tasks. And third, transparency for suppliers up front to consider whether they want or do not want to engage with you. Now, let's do again the mirror that we normally use to establish what the current state is in your company. So how many of the questions and statements Amy has can you answer with a resounding fact-based yes?
Do you have one set of general terms and conditions for your suppliers with only a few variations due to different legal systems?
The first check is, do we even have general terms and conditions? There is still in several corporations the assumption that general terms and conditions are challenging to establish and legally tricky to defend. Let me put your mind to rest. This is utter nonsense. You as well can check it with your legal folks, but trust me. Global terms and conditions are nothing but a simplification of otherwise expansive individual contractual documents. The second check is how many of those global terms and conditions exist in your company. The more you have, the more issues and work you have to maintain them. There is a need for up to 5 variations on the same document to care for countries such as France, Brazil, the USA, the Arabian Peninsula, and China. The rest is relatively straightforward. The main differences spring out of the different legal baselines. Case law, like in the Anglo-American setting and the former colonies and protectorates, versus common law, as in France, Germany, and most other companies conquered at one point by Napoleon. As well here, the former colonies and protectorates have similar codes.
You have a standard set of payment terms.
In another podcast in the mini-series about cash flow optimization, we covered the standardization of payment terms. Suffice it to say, sit accounts payable and procurement together in one room and let them only come out if they reduce the volume of payment terms to less than 50. Then have them operationalize them in their system, train them, and more importantly, put it into the global terms and conditions as an overarching guideline. So, for example, net 60 or net 90.
The standard template of the statement of work is owned by procurement. The individual SO creation and the performance tracking against metrics and KPIs are the responsibility of the internal customers.
In every procurement supply category, which can be up to 500 individual supply markets, there is an optimal way for how services and products should be defined. Procurement needs to own and constantly improve the statement of work with their respective performance metrics. When it comes to real estate or legal-related topics, this can be delegated to the colleagues in real estate and the legal department, mainly due to the available competence there. When measuring the metrics and fitting the statement of work templates with live, the department or organization using the service, product, or project is in the lead. It is beneficial to track this in systems to evaluate supplier performance regularly and work with the suppliers to constantly improve or just simply deliver on the basis of the contracts.
Only one set of NDAs, like one-sided, bilateral, or three-party exists, and all buyers know when to use them.
Not much to add on this one here besides one pet peeve of mine. Not every activity performed in procurement needs to be protected via an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. Always remember that in these NDAs, companies asked to keep silent for several years. Just ask yourself, is the activity I am performing with a potential supplier really so special that it needs protection? Every NDA must be managed on both sides. So keep it to the minimum.
Topics like confidentiality, liabilities, quality, and indemnity are clearly defined, and any change requires clear approval by procurement and legal.
Now, this is a biggie. I've seen so many contracts where years later, when issues arise, they had only small remnants of what has been defined as ample protection for the company. Millions have been paid and wasted due to the fact that the people in charge of signing contracts, in a honeymoon stupor, waived by themselves the need for the right of protection, impacting not only their department, but worst case, the performance of the whole company. It is fully understandable that in a very few supplier-buyer relationships, conditions need to be evaluated from a risk perspective. But this cannot be waived by a buyer, lawyer, or just a user of the service in the department. For changes that can have, worst case, a very negative impact for a plant, country, division, or whole company, escalation paths for approval have to go up to at least the grandfather hierarchical level, so the boss of the boss. And if the decision is highly contagious, walk away from the contract and start again.
There is a repository of standard documents and building blocks for procurement without involving legal case by case.
In the automotive and several high-volume industries, contractual legal negotiations are nearly no issue. The attitude by the OEMs is my way or the highway. So if you want to make eventually a lot of money by selling to them, you need to accept the rules of this industry. Full stop. In many other industries that do not understand the power of this standardization, buyers and suppliers are in constant rain dances around legal terms and contractual documents, wasting precious time to get the services and products into the company and, at some point in time, really add value. Hordes of lawyers are engaged on both sides to create overall noise level for mostly nothing. Suppliers should know what to expect when engaging with a client and decide upfront whether contractual conditions are acceptable for their insurance, risk, and whatever other departments that might have an opinion. So procurement, and for that matter as well sales, should have Lego-like building blocks agreed with legal to use in 99% of cases. No need to involve legal later. If you stay in these set swim lanes, you should be good.
There exists an aligned set of templates for internal procurement.
I once had the pleasure to work in a company with an intense vertical value chain. Business units sold to external customers as well to internal departments. Clearly, internal customers expected to have a better deal, and internal sellers did not want to give away margin when selling internally. This very easily resolvable situation, which involves a little bit of game theory, led in this firm, however, to a situation where they agreed on long contractual documents that they argued about and even had lawyers of the same company being engaged. What a waste! When we changed it, it took about 3 months, and we then had a document which was accepted by the board of directors, and that was it. Do not waste time negotiating internally, and if you do, blame your management board for not giving clear direction.
Commercial training exists for all buyers on how to use the contractual templates, and a corporate contractual training is given to new lawyers coming on board.
This is a fairly simple point that is nearly never done in companies. Teach buyers, and for the sake of it as well sales teams, what the terms in your contracts mean. These trainings take a day, can be done online or in role plays, depending on how complicated your terms are. When it comes to new lawyers, teach them how it works in your company. You don't want to basically have them invent the wheel again.
There is a standard driver's license training for anyone who wants to buy goods or services. Call it the license to buy.
Having the right to spend money, for example, if you have a budget or access to a procurement system, does not make you a prudent buyer. This requires training. You need to train your cost and negotiation muscles. Excellent buyers, when excellently trained, can go into Walmart, Migros, Carrefour, or Lidl to get produce at lower cost. And they get better car deals for their whole families and friends. Just ask yourself the simple question. If you're trying to buy something, are you very quickly in the discussion talking about the price, or is it something that you keep until the end or put it later in writing? Or maybe you think that you know the other party well and they will treat you fairly. If you do the latter, do not buy yourself. Your cultural upbringing is preventing you from creating value for your company when it comes to buying. Get a training and get a license to buy. If the company does not have something like this, say goodbye to good margins, since your cost of sales are just running through the fingers. So these were the questions and statements. If you answered yes to most of them, great. You have your corporate contract portfolio under control. Congratulations, well done. Do not listen any further. Better to stop and have a look at other podcasts from us. I'm sure you will find something that can help you to identify still gaps in your shop. However, if you answered several questions with a no or were unsure, you have an excellent opportunity to make your company more resilient contractually and efficient. We established that the benefit of a standard set of contractual documents is reducing your supply chain risk. In a standardized setup, like in the automotive or computing industry, buyers spend as little as 5% of their time on contractual topics. That means internal or external lawyers are less engaged and can rather deal with quicker turnarounds of sale contracts and litigations. We leave with you what this means for you and how much you value risk mitigation and efficiency as part of your activities. Just ask yourself, how would I set it up if I own the company myself? Now, if you have established that you have a gap and you want to set up a contract standardization project, as always, we give you a quick overview in terms of how to get this done. We start, as always, with a time plan. It takes 6 months, not more. Can be less depending on the lack of current focus. The board sponsor should be the general counsel. The lead overall should be the chief procurement officer, CPO. When it comes to project leads, we should deal with 2, one top talent from the procurement side and one from the legal side to work together. If you set up the blueprint of how your operation should work in the future state, try to benchmark against other industries and your competitors. If documents are in the public domain, copy with pride. Accept that you just are late to the game, and that's fine. A few words on the project setup. Weekly task force with clear objectives, monthly reporting to the board sponsor, and regularly to the board with clear output KPIs. For example, number of contractual standards developed and implemented, corporate external website for supplier established, training setup, number of employees trained, authority level for changes to templates implemented and communicated to the supply base. How do we sustain success? Well, first, do regular contractual audits by the internal audit team. You have a need for an online storage of all documents. Run maybe a small AI program to assess the alignment of contracts with template standards. Do annual updates, which are then approved by the General Counsel. When we look at digitalization automation, let's agree that none of this should be manual. If you do not have a system that can operationalize what we discuss here, get something well established. Ranking lists are available everywhere on the internet. Avoid do-it-yourself solutions. None I've seen in the last decades were worth their salt, and all were more expensive than the external versions that are out there. Looking at risk, it's low for this project, but high if standardization is foregone. It leads to high costs due to litigation, selecting the wrong suppliers, and unsuccessful claims due to amateurish contracts and simplified, super supplier-friendly indemnification clauses. Talking cost? Pretty small. Either set up an internal task force full-time, which I think is preferred, or employ external support, but then lead nevertheless internally. What do you have to watch out for? You have to watch out for missing adoption rate in procurement departments, the need for differentiation due to different legal systems, the need for translation with the same meaning, oversimplification, and missing competence coupled with misguided arrogance internally. Let's conclude. Standardize your contractual environment. It's more or less a matter of corporate hygiene. While cleaning up is not fancy, it is necessary to keep your contractual relationship clean. Otherwise, it starts to smell. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. I hope that you enjoyed this. And there's nothing more to say than stay safe and be bold. And thank you very much for listening.
A big thank you as well from me. If you enjoyed this podcast, how about signing up on our webpage or listening regularly on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other major platform? If you are interested in diving deeper into this topic, give us a call or leave your email on our webpage under Contact.
Goodbye.